So there's a lot to recap. Free agency has been fast and furious, but we are primarily a Miami Heat centric show. So I'm going to resist the impulse to just spout off all of the news of the day, which we will get to. Um, and we're going to get down to the nitty gritty as it relates to the Miami Heat. We didn't think that there'd be a lot from the Heat early in free agency here. Let's be honest. But we did have a stake in what was going to take place with Max Strus and Gabe Vincent. Unfortunately to report, or fortunately, I guess, depending on your vantage point, Gabe Vincent has agreed to join the Los Angeles Lakers. He went on a 3-year, $33 million deal to the Lakers. They use basically most of their taxpayer mid-level exception as Sean Rochester joins the show. Welcome. So that's the 12.4 million exception. But the way that really shakes out is 10.4 million in year one, 11 million in year two, and 11.5 in year three. That's per Miami Heat beats Brian Goins. That's 5% increments by year. So the Heat weren't willing to match that. We heard that they offered somewhere in the neighborhood of $7.8 to $8 million to start, and they did not want to go higher than that. Coincidentally, that's right around the room exception. That's a little interesting nugget that I'm going to chew on in the coming days. But I guess I'll start by saying this. I feel like this was a fair offer for Gabe Vincent. And when we talked leading into free agency, we heard a lot about Max Strus getting 16 million per year. And if he was getting that, what if Gabe got 15 or 14 or 13? But it ended up being around 11 if we're just going to split the difference here. And that feels like a fair offer. And the Heat until they bring their payroll, which is 176 million as we speak, until that comes down, they were not willing to gamble committing the salary to Gabe Vincent and then not being able to shed the salary and having the tax consequences that would have came with this. So, Alex Toledo, I'd like to start with you on your feelings on the Gabe Vincent move to Los Angeles. We don't want to hear about how and what he'll do for LA. We'll talk about that on another day. How do you feel about it as it relates to the Heat?
Well, we kind of did the raw reaction on playback. I think all of us were a little bit surprised because the Lakers were not one of the teams that had been floated for Gabe. Everybody had been talking about Toronto. If they lost, Fred VanVleet, we still don't know about that. But look, man, I agree with you. I think it's a good price for Gabe. And kind of my whole reaction to the thing was, why are they being so stingy with specific numbers? Like, I could understand that being your first offer and you trying to work with him, and because of there being no state tax in Florida or whatever, like, it's not that much of a difference. We talked about those things on playback, but you're in the luxury tax no matter what. Not only that, there's a very, very good chance you're going to be a second apron team under the new CBA no matter what. So why are they being stingy over a couple of $1 million at the end of the day, right? Just to throw that in there. It's not that it's the end of the world losing Gabe Vincent. If you told me, like you said during the playback, that they finished with a better regular season record and, maybe they're back in the finals, right? For all we know, it's not that they can't get over losing Gabe Vincent. To me, it's just not a great look. Like, I think he would have been useful whether or not you land Dame, whether or not you land somebody else. Like, the guy, along with Max Strus, who we still don't have full news on, it seems like there's traction with him maybe heading to Cleveland for just a much bigger contract than what Gabe got, much, much bigger. So that's a different story. But losing both of them, but it's two guys who were just big-time playoff starters for you in 2 straight deep playoff runs. It's hard to, I think, just accept losing those guys for nothing. And I think that looks like that's where it's headed. The one silver lining we can take from what's happened so far, it looks like, Kevin Love, his market is drying up a little bit. Maybe he comes back. But no, the Gabe thing, oh my God, Brady, don't start. The Gabe thing, it kind of sucks. Like, if you're a Heat fan, I get, like, people, like we said on playback, right? They have PTSD with some of these other contracts that have been thrown out in the past. When you're a contender, it's all about spending, man. When you get to the finals 2 times in 4 years, conference finals, game 7 and the other one, you're an obvious contender. You should be spending, not, basically letting guys who were playoff contributors walk because of a couple of $1 million discrepancy. That's kind of where I come down on it. Like, I think losing either one of them, I feel that way. But the Gabe thing just seems like it was a lot closer to their number. Whereas like Max, if he really does get 4 years, 64 mil, it's a different story. And you have a Duncan Robinson signed on for 3 more years. There's Kyle Lowry, who's signed on for 1 more year, is very old. And I like Kyle Lowry's game. I'm not trying to like crap on him. What I'm saying is he also might be moved too. So it seems like if they don't get Dame, their whole point guard situation is just weird right now. You can only replace him with a veteran minimum. So I don't think somebody of that level is going to replace the playoff impact he gave you in 2 straight years. So I'm not a fan of letting the Lakers get him.
Yeah, and I guess to Heat fans' credit, there is a little bit of PTSD with what happened with Duncan Robinson. So I know that there was a faction of the fan base that said, hey, maybe this is like Kendrick Nunn and when he left. But Gabe Vincent and Kendrick Nunn are not the same player, not the same person. And I agree with Alex to a large degree, but I'll just say this, that the Heat already were at a payroll number that was equivalent to where teams are now spending up to. So I also think we should keep that in perspective. I know no one wants to hear it. But then the other part is this, and Brady, I want to come to you next on the basketball aspect of it. Just quickly, because I know stuff changes so much. I don't want you to do too deep of a dive. But let me just come to you with this. Gabe Vincent's gone, and Alex mentioned Kyle Lowry's your only point guard. If they don't get Dame, what point guard is such a unique position, particularly for this team. What do you see them doing, and what are the biggest things they're going to miss from Gabe Vincent that you think is going to be like, how can they replicate what they got from Gabe Vincent from, just from your perspective?
I mean, yeah, so it's going to have to be like, it's on 2 sides of the spectrum what you have to do now in that position. Like, it's either you land Dame or you have to sign veteran minimum point guards or replace them that way. Or on that same spectrum, you replace them with an undrafted guy down the line in the summer league, which I don't expect to happen. It's probably going to be the veteran minimum way if they don't land Dame. So what do they need? To your point, they're not going to – if you ask Spo that question, he'd stare you in the eyes because he'd say they're positionless. We don't need a point guard. You have 5 guys on the court. They just need somebody that was as versatile as Gabe, in my opinion. I just thought that was a big thing. The fact that they were able to put him in at the 2, they were able to play him off ball, on ball, run him in actions, play at the top of a 2-2-1 press, like all of those things. He did a lot of things for this team, and they just like those Swiss Army knife players. So it's like we can have fun and look at percentages and look at 3-point percentage, or we look at certain players that they can potentially get. But they need somebody that could do a lot of things because that's kind of how they mold certain things. So in terms of the contract, I mean, yeah, I'm pretty much there with Alex. It was kind of surprised that it was the Lakers. It felt like, I'm not the reporter side of things, Greg, that's all you, but there was said from the camp that they were expecting a low ball from the very beginning. Like, this was way before anything. There was an expectation on it, but I wonder if there was an expectation on the fact that if they would budge. That's kind of where I was thinking, my thinking was like, because they did low ball, but they also didn't move from that low ball point. Like, it didn't feel like there was heavy negotiations away from that. So that's kind of where I guess my questions would lay. But in terms of as a player, to your point, I think it's going to land heavily in the veteran minimum range, and as well as, are we going to be back in 2021? We were talking about a playback with Tyler Hero at point guard. Is that where we're going to land all of a sudden if you want to keep Kyle Lowry as your backup point guard?
Yeah.
I don't know. Or hey, maybe Jovic. I don't know.
They got to get creative. And I think that they've always been a team that has shown that they can get creative via trade. Max Strus, it was reported by Mark Stein initially that he was leaning towards Cleveland and there was sign and trade talks. Barry Jackson's reported on it. Sean Rochester, I'll come to you on this as I pivot to Max Strus. And we can come back to Gabe if y'all want to unpack that more later.